Now for Raising the Bar, Greater RVA's premier Law Talk radio show. Call into the show with your stories and questions at 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366.
Good morning and welcome to Raising the Bar, Greater RVA's Law Talk radio show. This is attorney Colleen Quinn of the law firm Locke & Quinn. And today we're going to talk about gestational carriers and surrogates. But before we start talking about surrogacy, I just want to remind you that Raising the Bar, Greater RVA's Law Talk radio show, brings an exciting and varied array of legal topics to listeners throughout Central Virginia, and especially in the Greater Richmond area. At least once per week on Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m., our one-hour show features true life stories and cases, legal tips and information from experts and specialists, and from folks that have actually gone through certain legal experiences. We're going to also have a variety of different shows that talk about a lot of different areas of the law. The law touches nearly every aspect of daily life, and this show brings both humorous and entertaining stories along with some helpful tips, including tips on access to legal services, something that not everyone can afford. So just be reminded that Locke & Quinn is located right next to the Chipotle and now the Chick-fil-A at Willow Lawn. So you can come and dine on a variety of different options at Willow Lawn while also getting your legal services. Locke & Quinn focuses on personal injury and also family law. We also do estate planning and employment law. And in particular, I run an adoption and surrogacy law center, which brings us to today's topic, which is surrogacy. So with me today is my client and three-time surrogate, Brooke Kalan. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning.
It's so nice to have you here today. And as we talk about surrogacy, if anybody would like to call into the show, please call in at 804-454-1366. Again, 804-454-1366. So, Brooke, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a mother of 4 now and a school teacher as well. So I lead quite a busy life.
You do, absolutely. And in the car ride on over this morning, we were talking about your 4th child, which was actually your 7th pregnancy,
Yes.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was that little girl was kind of an accident, but a good accident.
She was our surprise blessing, we call her.
There you go. So what prompted you to think about being a gestational carrier?
Actually, my sister-in-law had been going through some fertility issues, and we had offered, when we were pregnant with our 3rd son, to carry for her. And she actually decided to pursue a different route, but I had already started doing the research, and I had reconnected with an old friend of mine from high school who was a surrogate in Texas, and she had shared a lot of information about it. And so I was just really already involved in the process, and I really wanted to help someone become a family.
So at that point, you had pretty much thought, I'm going to do this for somebody. And it didn't happen to be your sister-in-law, but you said, I'm going to go down this path because I think this is just a good thing to do.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about surrogacy, we use that term kind of loosely because there's a gestational carrier is actually somebody that gestates the child, but is not biologically connected to the child, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, so you would be carrying a child that was biologically from the sperm and egg of another couple.
Yes.
Right. And then a true surrogate is actually one that does use her own egg. And of course, that is a completely different type of situation,
yes,
because it would be much more difficult if the child was biologically connected to you.
Yes, I don't think I could have been a traditional surrogate.
Yeah. So when you were doing that research, where did you look for research on becoming a surrogate?
Actually, my friend from Texas, actually online is where we reconnected on Facebook, and she showed me a few different websites that I think some of them no longer exist because it was so many years ago. But basically online is where I found a lot of my information, and just some of the Facebook groups. And there's actually a lot of information out there that's easy to find now.
And speaking of Facebook, we are on Facebook Live on the Locke and Quinn Facebook page. So if you'd like to view this by video rather than just audio, please like us on Locke and Quinn on the Facebook page, and you can pick up this video live. So when we're talking about somebody being a surrogate, typically you enjoy being pregnant. Is that the case?
I did. I had wonderful pregnancies, no morning sickness, and was very thankful for that.
And you had the 3 boys before you decided you were going to be a surrogate, is that right?
Yes, we had 3 boys of our own at that time.
Okay. And your husband, Danny, he was completely supportive and on board?
He was, and I think that's a very important aspect of being a surrogate, is your husband has to be supportive because they're involved tremendously.
And he also knew that you were a happy pregnant person, because if you were a grumpy one, he probably wouldn't have been as supportive, right?
Right.
So how did you figure out how to get matched with some intended parents?
Again, my friend that I had reconnected with on Facebook, she put me, connected me to a website called Surrogates Online is the one that I used, and that's where I actually met my first couple. I posted an ad and had tremendous responses, and I basically got to choose who I wanted to carry for. And then I reached out to you to represent me. So that's how I met my first couple. We talked and reconnected for a while, and just got to know each other before I decided I wanted to carry for them.
And what were you looking for in those intended parents?
I was looking for somebody who wanted to keep in touch, because I wanted to know what happened to those children that I had carried. And then I also was looking at someone who did not want to abort, because I did not want to abort unless there was something dramatically wrong that was going to cost me my life, because I had to think of my 3 children as well.
Right.
So that was very important. We had to agree on abortion, and we had to agree on wanting to keep in touch afterwards.
And that's what we find when we are matching intended parents and surrogates, is that we need to make sure that folks that are more of a pro-life mindset are matched with folks of a more pro-life mindset, and vice versa. Folks that are more pro-choice need to be matched with folks that are also more pro-choice.
Right.
So we don't have a disconnect in terms of, religious views or just general views of life and sanctity of life.
Yes.
So, and also a website now is Surro Moms Online, I think, where a lot of folks are placing ads, etc., or matching through fertility clinics or surrogacy programs, or actually at Locke and Quinn in the Adoption and Surrogacy Law Center, we actually match for free. We were talking about that.
Right.
Virginia has an anti-surrogacy broker statute, so nobody can charge compensation for actually putting surrogates and intended parents together. So that actually has to be done for free, the matching part in Virginia, whereas coordination of services and legal services and whatnot can be charged. So how did you find me?
I think I just Googled online surrogate lawyers or adoption surrogacy lawyers, and your name came up.
And that means my SEO website guys are doing a good job.
That's right.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the geographic proximity of the intended parents and you during the process. How important is that to be kind of close to them?
I think for me it was important. I know I've seen surrogates on the Facebook boards who are further apart, but to me that was important because I wanted to have that relationship with the family. The first couple that I carried for actually live in Maryland, so it was a little bit further, but they're right outside of DC, so not too far from Richmond. So they were able to make it to all the appointments and be there for the delivery and everything. And that was very important to me, that they were close enough to come to the appointment so it didn't feel like it was my pregnancy. I wanted them to be as much a part of the pregnancy as they could be.
Yeah, and so then the other families that you carried for, where were they located generally?
The second family I carried for actually lived 5 minutes from me.
Wow.
So they were many times she would pick me up on the way to the doctor and, we would ride together, which was a great bonding time for us. And then the third couple, excuse me, also lived in Richmond and they've since moved. to Charlottesville, which is not too far away. So I still get to see the second and third couple. The first couple, I don't see them as often anymore, just because of distance.
Right.
So
it was really important to you that they experience the pregnancy
Yes.
As part of the whole process.
Absolutely.
And many of these couples have had a lot of difficulty getting pregnant. They've suffered miscarriages, etc. So
Yes.
kind of going through that whole pregnancy process can be a very emotionally rewarding piece. And I think that you truly appreciated that part of it.
Yes, that's what I wanted them to be a part of, because I wanted them to experience a pregnancy from the beginning to end.
Right. So we have at the Adoption Surrogacy Law Center, we have some intended parents that are in China and in England and in Germany. And of course, that's a much more difficult process for the surrogates that are caring for those families in foreign
Right.
countries, because they can Skype or they can WeChat chat, or they can Google Hangout or Tango, or all the different, video type chat options that are out there, or internet chat options. But still, those folks can't come to the medical appointments and really have a closer experience.
Right. And there's nothing, to me, there's nothing like seeing your baby on that ultrasound for the first time, and to be there in person. I really wanted that for those families.
And you get to see their faces light up when they see that ultrasound.
Yes, and that was so rewarding.
So let's talk a little bit about what the qualifications are to be a gestational carrier. What were some of those qualifications that you needed to have to pass muster?
I had to do a very intensive medical screening, blood work, and checking all my womanly parts to make sure that they worked appropriately. You had to be, I believe, over 21. It's been a few years now. I think that's the age
Right.
that it is. Is that right?
Yes. Well,
And so, and then also having carried your own children successfully before, and not having difficulties while being pregnant was also what the fertility center wanted as well. And then the aspect of going through psych evals, my husband and myself, and also the intended parents, the couples that I was caring for, we all had to go through psych evals in order to go through the process as well.
make sure that you could all withstand going
Yes.
through the process mentally. So the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, they keep changing their guidelines quite frequently in the surrogacy world. The most recent guidelines coming out in February of 2017. And again, just kind of reiterating how important those psych evaluations are. And then also the group counseling, everybody sitting down and kind of talking about what's the level of contact we're going to have,
Right.
what's the level of communication we're going to have, what is it going to look like after the birth. Is it the type of arrangement which you wanted, which was to get just some updates on how those children you carried were doing.
Yes.
So also those ASRM guidelines, one of the first thing is that you need to get cleared by your OBGYN,
Mhm.
right? So you need to make sure you have.
Yeah, so I first had to have an evaluation done by my personal OBGYN, and then I went through more testing with the fertility doctor as well.
So you had the
So-
psych testing and then all that medical clearance.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
And then of course, during the pregnancy, you have to abstain from, any drugs, tobacco, alcohol, etc. But now you also have to drink plenty of water and avoid, fish or foods that might have mercury. And you can't have any tattoos or piercings or henna or introduce your body to dyes. You can't go to
Yes.
countries where the Zika virus might be. So lots of various restrictions.
Right. And I think I've read on some of the surrogacy boards as well that there are parents who want to control what the surrogates eat while they're pregnant. Fortunately, my parents did not try to control what I ate while I was pregnant, but some intended parents want to have that control too. And I can understand why. They want a healthy baby. So,
Right. But that can be a little intrusive if
Yes.
you're micromanaging everything you eat every day.
Yes.
Well, you were fortunate. We look for intended parents that are not going to micromanage, but we joke in the surrogacy world about the West Coast contract versus the East Coast contract, because the West Coast contract usually has an organic food allowance in it, and the folks on the West Coast tend to be a little bit more whole body health minded. So
I can see
eating,
that.
right, eating organically, etc. We did have one case that it fell apart because the intended mother wanted to give the organic food allowance to the surrogate, but not to her entire family. And so, of course, that would pose problems with cooking for the entire family. And that was just kind of the tip of the iceberg on some of the issues in that particular situation. So let's talk a little bit about the financial side of things. As you learned in Virginia, a surrogate can't be paid compensation, but can receive payments for medical expenses as well as ancillary expenses. And ancillary expenses includes reasonable household living expenses attributable to the pregnancy. So talk a little bit about how that worked in your situation.
In my case, we did just the flat monthly allowance. Yes. And I know in some cases they reimbursed me for like my medical copays. And so I paid those things up front and they reimbursed me. I know in some cases people have worked out where they have used like a debit card that they pay their medical bills with, and it's connected to the intended parents' accounts. We didn't do that for me, but for us, we just did the monthly allowance, and then they reimbursed me for my medical bills. And I didn't ask for like groceries or any of those types of things because I would be buying those anyway.
Right. So in some of the cases, there is not only the monthly allowance, but then there's the allowance for maternity clothes. And then if you carry multiples, if you have a C-section,
yes.
invasive procedures. So there can be those different variables. What about life insurance? Was that a factor?
Yes, they did purchase an additional life insurance policy for me that was for 1 year while I was pregnant and going through the process of, getting pregnant. And that was just in case something were to happen to me so that my husband could take care of our family if something happened to me. And part of that was also, I think it was about $50,000 or $75,000, I can't remember off the top of my head, went to them to reimburse them in case they had to go through the surrogacy process again. Because if I passed away and something happened to the baby, then they would not be getting the end result of what they were hoping for, a new child.
Right. And these the intended parents typically invest so much, especially on the medical side of things, yes. to have the eggs retrieved from the intended mother or to get donor eggs, and then to form the embryos and to store the embryos, and then to pay for the embryo transfer. And of course, talk a little bit about, on the medical side, what had to happen to get your body medically ready for that embryo transfer.
I had to do shots daily. So my husband got to poke me in the behind with a shot. And he did not like needles. And so that was actually very challenging for him to have to give me a shot every day. And actually, as we got a little bit further into the process, it was 2 shots a day.
Wow.
So because they give you estrogen and progesterone. So he had a difficult time with that, but he got used to it after a while. And I always was sure not to make him angry before shot time.
Wow. Yeah, you want to make sure that person's very gentle with those yes. shots, I would yes. imagine. So what were those chemicals supposed to be doing? Estrogen and progesterone.
What the estrogen was to build the lining so that the embryo had a nice place to implant when it was time for the transfer, and then the progesterone was to keep the pregnancy because your body is it's basically foreign to them since it's not your pregnancy. So the progesterone was to keep you pregnant basically until I think it was about 10 or 12 weeks when I got to stop the shots when I was about 10 weeks pregnant.
Okay. So basically they're wanting to make sure that you keep that pregnancy, you yes. don't miscarry.
Yes.
So, Going back a little bit to the life insurance piece, so in these contracts, we want to make sure we're looking at all possible contingencies. And of course, there is a risk in being pregnant and delivering. So it was important to protect your family in case something did happen to
Absolutely.
you. Yeah. And then also the investment made by the intended parents in the whole process. So basically what you're saying is if there's a $300,000 policy or $500,000 policy, that your family would be the beneficiary, or your husband would be the beneficiary of most of that policy.
Correct.
But then about 50 to 75,000 of that would go to the intended parents as the beneficiaries if something were to happen to you.
Yes, that way, because there is a lot of money that goes into the egg retrieval and making the embryos. And so before you even become pregnant as a surrogate, they are investing a lot of money. And so that would basically, hopefully, reimburse them some of that cost if something unfortunately would happen to you as well as the baby at that time.
Right. And now, also, one of the things that is being put into all the contracts is if something were to happen to the intended parents. So the intended parents now have to have their estate plan documents in place and their guardian and trustee arrangements in place, because if something were to happen to them, the surrogate needs to be protected. And,
Right.
When you went into this, you were not planning on bringing another child home, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And so we want to make sure that the surrogate is protected in terms of, one, who is taking this child, and two, who's going to continue to meet the obligations, including the financial obligations that are in the contract.
I'm pretty sure that was in my contract as well. If they went on a trip to Vegas or something while I was pregnant and their airplane crashed, that something was in place for what would happen to the baby.
Well, as your attorney, I did make sure that they designated their guardians for sure.
Like, I'm pretty sure that was in there.
So before we go on break, and if anybody wants to call into the show, it's 804-454-1366. Again, 804-454-1366. We would love to take your calls if you have any questions about surrogacy. But before we go on break, let's talk just a little bit about the process of working with an attorney. How did your attorney get paid?
Actually, it came from the intended parents. So the intended parents paid for your services for me.
There you go.
So, yeah.
And how was that process?
I thought it all went really smoothly. I was very fortunate that my intended parents did not, because I think it was because we discussed so much beforehand, before the contract process, that we were on the same page. And so we didn't have a lot of back and forth in contract negotiations, because we pretty much were on the same page before we even got to that point.
And that is a really critical piece, Brooke, is that making sure that all of the financial terms, all of the other terms have been agreed upon before you get to that contract drafting, so there are no surprises,
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And in your situation, I believe that you also insisted that your attorney draft the contract.
Yes, you did.
Yes, which was smart on your end. So we are going to take a break, and feel free to call in 804-454-1366. This is Colleen Quinn with Brooke Kalan, and we're talking about surrogacy this morning. We'll be right back. Thank you.
You've been listening to Raising the Bar, Greater Richmond's premier law talk radio show. Call into the show with your stories and questions at 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366.
With SRN News, I'm Bob Agnew in Washington. A decision by U.S. Senator Jeff Flake to bow out of a re-election fight could now spur a rush of other Republican candidates who might hope to take on his only announced challenger in next year's Arizona primary. The freshman senator's decision came after months of statements where he said he expected a tough primary and general election race, but believed he could win. He is among the Republican lawmakers who've had something of an ongoing disagreement, very public, with President Trump. The Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign helped to fund a political research firm that produced a dossier of allegations about the president's alleged ties to Russia. That's according to a person familiar with the situation who spoke yesterday to the Associated Press. We're at the opening bell now on Wall Street, and futures right before that bell were up by 170 points. That's the direction the Dow is moving. The NASDAQ was down about 11. This is SRN News.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
My husband and I wanted to buy a new car, and we don't have very good credit rating, so the bank recommended Trinity, so we called them. And the people were very nice. They told us the best solution for our problems.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-936-5348. to talk to a certified counselor.
Trinity consolidated our bills, got us a lower interest rate, and a much better monthly payment.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
We feel much better now. Things are going pretty well. And since we've been with Trinity, our credit rating has really improved.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-936-5348.
My name is Ann, and we're debt-free for keeps.
1-800-936-5348.
But the story that they tell is you just don't care. You people, you're mean, you hate women, you hate children, you hate clean air, and you hate clean water. And we have to combat that story with our own story, our own stories of truth.
Tune in to Brother Craig, the Hatchet Man, Saturdays, 10 a.m. to noon, here on Richmond's Choice for Conservative Talk Radio, WNTW 820 AM and 97.7 FM, The Answer. That ad you just heard, it could have been yours. That's right, you could have just heard your ad instead of some other guys. On AM 820 and 97.7 FM, you can reach more potential customers, many just like you, who can add dollars to your bottom line. Our team will work with you to make the perfect ad for your business. So give us a call at 804-717-2000. That's 804-717-2000. Your first step to becoming a household name.
Now, back to Raising the Bar. Call into the show with your stories and questions at 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366.
Good morning. We are back. This is attorney Colleen Quinn with Locke & Quinn and the Adoption and Surrogacy Law Center. And this is Raising the Bar, Greater RVA's Law Talk radio show. This morning we're talking about surrogacy and what is it like to be a surrogate or gestational carrier. Joining me today is Brooke Kalan, a 3-time surrogate, in fact carrying twins twice, and having a total overall of 7 pregnancies. So Brooke has been my client and very open and willing to share her experience. Right before the break, we were talking a little bit about the legal process. And so during the contracting process, Brooke, did you feel like you had your fair say and involvement in the terms of the contract?
Oh, absolutely, especially since I had you draft the contract for me. So it was the way I wanted it from the get-go. So that was very helpful, I feel like. It was, I think, like I said, a fairly easy process for me, and only because I had talked so much with the intended parents before and gotten to know them so well that we were pretty much on the same page when it came to that time.
And those contracts include everything you could possibly imagine, including if you were in a car wreck and had to be placed on life support.
Yes.
If you ended up having a personal injury claim against somebody for causing the car wreck, and whether if you lost a pregnancy, whether the intended parents would share in that claim, and of course all sorts of contingencies.
Yeah, I think it was 50 or 55 pages long, something like that.
I think it's grown to about 60 pages now. So all sorts of, we always say that if we can think of all sorts of morbid and terrible scenarios and put them in the contract, then hopefully they won't happen.
Hopefully. And those are some of the things that the psychologist talked with us about as well, as, you know, what if this would happen to you, and all of the kind of morbid things that you don't want to think could happen to you. So that was a very important part of the process, though.
Right. For the psychologists or the licensed clinical social workers that are doing these screenings, that is a really important role that they play. They're not only evaluating you, but they're also making sure you really understand all of the risks that are going into these arrangements.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the parentage and birth certificate amendment process. How did that go?
It was actually very easy for us. We basically, when you're in the hospital and the baby's born, and that was another thing that we had talked about beforehand, is how we wanted to handle the delivery and whether the parents would be in there, and how we would handle the hospital stay as well. I know some parents get a separate room and keep the baby with them, and all of my parents chose to just come to the room with me, and we kind of were one big happy family in the hospital, which was really nice that I still got to see the baby too. But after the baby was born, we had to fill out, of course, the birth certificate paperwork in the hospital, just like you do for your own child. And we had to put my name and my husband's name, and then we put the baby's name as the parents wanted it. And after, and I don't remember the timeline exactly. I'm sure
you can't sign until 3 days after
Yes.
birth, right?
So, and then we applied for a birth certificate amendment, which basically changed the parents' names from our names to the intended parents. So they never got a piece of paper, the little birth certificate paper that you get with our names on it. It was just the paperwork, and then the actual birth certificate came with their names on it.
Right. So Virginia has a relatively easy process.
It was very simple.
The name of the surrogate does have to go down at the hospital on the record of birth, but nobody asks for a birth certificate to be issued that lists you or your husband, and so the only birth certificate that gets issued is the one that lists the intended parents. It's interesting too. We've actually gotten pre-birth orders from other states, given full faith and credit and domesticated in Virginia, that order the hospital to put the intended parents down on the birth record, but the director of vital records has said, no, that we're trying to track these arrangements, and if you do that, it's going to screw up our statistics and our tracking.
Okay.
Yeah, so we want to make sure we put the surrogate's name down, and then we have the amendment paperwork that's filed, and that way we're able to be very orderly and be able to track the number of these arrangements, which are increasing in frequency. In fact, we're seeing the number of surrogate arrangements go up while the number of adoptions has been going down. I think with medical technology and more people like you willing to carry for somebody, that this is a new way of family building.
Well, and I think with adoption, you run the risk of the biological mother changing her mind. And in the case of surrogacy, you don't have that risk. So I think it becomes a better option for people who have fertility issues.
Yeah. So you were really lucky because you matched with 3 great families, but was there anybody along the way that was not really the right match?
Well, so like I said, the first match was done online, but the second and third, we went through your service, and you gave me some intended couples to talk with. And so there was one intended couple who the mother, when I went to lunch with her, talked to me about wanting to transfer to herself as well as transfer to me. And that kind of raised a red flag to me. I had some concerns with that and didn't feel like that would be the best match for me.
Right. Not all arrangements are the best arrangements.
Yes.
So that would have been a little bit different. We did have one situation where the surrogate carried twins and the intended mother got pregnant at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So they ended up having basically triplets.
Wow.
But you would think that would be a difficult arrangement, because you would hope the intended mother was kind of focused on your pregnancy, but if she was pregnant as well and focused on her own pregnancy, or if she was on bed rest, et cetera, then you wouldn't have the close relationship that you really wanted to kind of have.
Exactly. And that was what it was. I wanted to have that close relationship with the mom, and she had previous miscarriages. So I was also concerned that if she miscarried and I was still pregnant, what kind of relationship that would cause for us. And so I just really wanted someone who I was able to connect with.
Right.
And I wasn't sure that would be able to happen with this couple.
And that's an excellent point, because most folks are looking for a surrogate because they've had difficulty carrying and have had miscarriages. So in all likelihood, she may have had another miscarriage in that situation. So you were really thinking that through. So how did you explain this to your 3 boys?
Well, my first surrogacy was when my youngest was only 3. So those twin boys just turned 7 in May. And so my youngest was 3, and my middle was 5, and my oldest was 7. So they didn't quite understand it. I basically just kind of explained to them in very generic terms that the mom's tummy was broken and she couldn't carry a baby for herself. And so I was going to grow her baby for her. And I wanted to make sure that they knew this was not our baby to be giving away, that this was their baby and I was just carrying it for her. And so I just told them that they put her egg in my tummy and we were growing her baby for her. And they seemed to accept it well. And they actually, the second surrogacy, I did the same thing. And by the third surrogacy, they were a little older, so they asked more questions, but But
it was mommy's growing another egg.
Yes, but they still knew that it wasn't our baby, but they just had a few more questions. So.
There you go. Well, it's great because there are so many children's books out now for intended parents to explain the surrogacy process, but also there are more books coming out with regard to help the surrogate explain to her own children
yes.
what you're doing. And yes, this baby's not coming home. This baby's for another family. So the mental health professional group of of ASRM have a wonderful list of children's books on their website, and also they have a great Facebook page as well. So having those tools as surrogacies become so much more accepted, we're starting to see more and more tools to help. You were one of those kind of pioneers that didn't have those tools.
Right.
So explaining it to your kids is a really important piece of the process. How did your husband feel about you not only being a surrogate once, but 3 times?
He actually was very supportive, and he liked to tell people that I was pregnant, but not with his baby, because he thought it was funny. I did not get a kick out of that, but he did. But he was very supportive, and he actually would come to all the appointments with me. So he supported the process the whole time. And like I said, I think that's very, very important. Very important to have a supportive husband.
Right. And that's one of the things when we're looking at somebody who wants to be a carrier or surrogate is, do they have that family support? Of course, if somebody's in the middle of a divorce or in the middle of litigation, then those are things that will indicate that's not going to be a good carrier arrangement.
Right.
The other thing is our criminal background clearances now. That's becoming more and more important. I actually had a case where the intended parents I was representing ended up learning that their surrogate had an outstanding warrant for her arrest.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and she ended up spending the rest of the pregnancy in prison.
Oh gosh.
Yes, and so we figured, okay, she's probably not doing drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or anything like that. Although if you watch Orange Is the New Black, you kind of wonder, what does she have access to? But basically, the intended parents weren't able to go to those medical visits or even be present at the birth of the child. So in your situation, you and the intended parents knew each other pretty intimately, and so having a criminal background check wasn't quite as much of a necessity. But in some of these arrangements, the folks don't know each other as well. And having that sort of background check on all the parties can become something that's definitely recommended.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the first family that you cared for. How was it that you ended up with twins?
We transferred 2. She had, I think it was 6 miscarriages previously. Aww. And so we had transferred 2, hoping to get 1, and they both took the first try. So we were very fortunate. And she got 2 wonderful little boys.
Yes, and so now the ASRM guidelines are recommending more just one embryo transfer because that is so hard on your body, isn't it?
It is. It was definitely a different pregnancy than, because I had carried 3 boys previously, but they were one baby at a time. And so it didn't really start to bother me until I got further along. In the beginning, I think I was a little more tired, but in the beginning, it was not much different than my own pregnancies. Towards the end, just because I was had so much more belly, it was definitely a different type of pregnancy. Hard to lean over the bathtub and clean the tub, and hard to get down and give my 3-year-old a bath. It was definitely more challenging carrying twins than doing a singleton.
Well, and you and I have that in common because I carry twins as well. Of course, they're 25 years old now, so they're much older. But I did not carry twins twice like you did, nor did I have other children at home that I was having to care for. So you really are a trooper for taking that on. And it was very fortunate that both embryos took in both cases, because you carried twins a second time, right?
I did. And actually the second time we originally transferred one, and we did have a miscarriage with that one. And so when we went and decided, gave ourselves some time to grieve, her and myself, I think it actually was harder on me to lose somebody else's baby. I had previously, after our third child, we had a miscarriage.
Wow.
So I think it was harder on me just because I had someone else depending on me. It was harder on me to lose somebody else's baby than it actually was to lose my own.
Wow.
Because somebody else was, depending on me, and it wasn't just my own grief, it was their grief as well. And so we did lose one for the second couple, and then we decided, when we decided to go back again with them, we talked a lot and consoled each other, and decided to transfer 2 the second time. And they have a 5-year-old little boy and little girl who they actually gave their middle names after my husband and myself.
Wow, that's so wonderful.
I just went to their 5th birthday party, and yeah.
Oh, how fun. That is so nice of you to be willing to share your story of that miscarriage. And so when that happened, and of course, here I am, the lawyer, asking from the contractual side of things, but what were your obligations legally after you had that miscarriage?
In the contract, it said that we would try 3 times. And so that was the legal aspect, but she actually came back and left it up to me and said if I did not want to try again, that she was totally okay with that. But of course, she would love to try again. And so she was not going to hold me to the 3 times that were in the contract. But I wanted to give that gift of a baby to her. And so we went back and transferred 2, and we're very fortunate that they went to term.
Yeah, yes. So normally if a carrier does miscarry, then that's kind of an out provision but there is that other provision in the contract that does also say that you'll try again. So those are kind of conflicting provisions in terms of you had an out, but you also had committed to so many transfer attempts.
Right.
And in your situation, fortunately, you were close enough with those folks that you decided not to take that out, but no, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to give this another good old college try.
Yes. Yes.
So, and so in that situation, you again carried twins. How was that carrying twins a second time? Was that harder?
It was actually harder the second time. I had done it once and I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, but towards the end of the pregnancy, I ended up with high blood pressure. And so we had to do an emergency C-section where I had to be put to sleep.
Wow.
So nobody got to come in, to the delivery room or the operating room for that. Whereas the first time around, my husband and the intended mom got to be there. Even though that was a C-section, the hospital was very accommodating and allowed us to have my husband and the intended mom in there. And this time, since I had to be put to sleep, since it was an emergency C-section, they didn't allow anybody in there with me.
Gotcha. We have about 10 minutes left in the show. If anybody would like to call in, the phone number is 804-454-1366. This is attorney Colleen Quinn, and I'm here today with 3 surrogate, Brooke Colon, the first 2 times carrying twins. And we're about to talk about the 3rd time. But if you have any questions, call into the show, 804-454-1366. Any questions about surrogacy or being a gestational carrier. So, Brooke, let's talk about the 3rd time. I can't believe you went for a 3rd.
So the 3rd time, we actually decided just to transfer one. And it took the first time, and he just turned 3 in September. And I was able actually to do a VBAC, and so I didn't have to have a C-section, which was wonderful. And the parents got to be in the delivery room, and my husband was in the delivery room, and so it was actually a great experience. I did actually, which made it a little traumatic at the end after the baby was born, and I did hemorrhage afterwards. I had a postpartum hemorrhage, so hence why it's wonderful to have in the contract if anything happens because it was scary for a while. But everything turned out okay, and I was fortunate enough to have a wonderful doctor who took care of it quickly. So.
Wow, that's really good. And obviously your reproductive capabilities were still intact because you accidentally had your daughter not that long ago.
And I recently have a 10-month little girl. So, and everything went wonderful with that pregnancy as well. So I've been very fortunate.
And you were able to see the excitement on the intended parent's face for that delivery because you were wide awake for that one.
Yes, and there's actually a beautiful picture on Facebook that she's shared several times of her standing next to me holding the baby because the doctor kind of just let him come out onto the bed, and he told her, because she just looked at him, and he told her, pick up your child. And she wasn't, it was, so just, it's a wonderful picture of it's her and I and her husband, and she's holding the baby next to me, and we're all crying. And it's just a beautiful picture. It just shows the raw emotion of what we went through.
Which is really wonderful. And in fact, that family shared their story with the TV station not that long ago. Yes. And that was a beautiful story because you've stayed in touch with that family as well.
Right.
So, so what type of person do you think it takes to be a surrogate or gestational carrier?
I think you have to be caring, and I think you have to be a strong person. Again, have a supportive husband. And I think I basically knew that I couldn't do it if it was my own egg. And so I knew that I had to do gestational surrogacy. And really, you have to jump in with both feet. It's a process, and it takes a lot of commitment.
What was the level of communication that you had with the intended parents over the 3 times that you carried?
We pretty much either texted or talked every day. Fortunately, with technology, that was possible. And so, and definitely the last surrogacy, she came and she visited while I was pregnant. And since we live so close, I'm a teacher now, but I was staying at home watching children, and she would come and just hang out with me during the day. So we built a really great relationship together, and we would go to lunch, and just it was a wonderful relationship. And actually, I had great relationships all 3 times. I was very fortunate.
So what was the hardest thing about being a carrier?
I think in the end, when it's all over, I think that's the hardest thing, just because you're so used to that connection, or I was very used to that connection with the mom and the dad. I mean, of course, I was closer with the mom, but that connection and that friendship and that bond, and then they have a newborn to take care of, and that just takes so much of your time. And so then we're not texting every day and every couple minutes. And so just that, once that it's all over, I think that was the most challenging part. And not that I wanted to be pregnant or have the baby anymore, just that relationship changed.
Right, because the intended parents now have a newborn, or in 2 of your cases, they had 2 newborns.
Right.
And so, of course, their focus now has shifted to taking care of their kids.
Yes. Rightfully so.
Yeah. But suddenly you're kind of left in the dark.
Yes.
And so that can be that can be emotionally challenging, I imagine.
Yeah, especially when you have all those hormones after pregnancy going through your body. It's emotionally challenging. The end, I think, was the hardest part for me, just that the finalization, that it was over, and I just enjoyed so much being pregnant and being a part of their lives every day, and then it's over.
Right.
But I mean, we still talk, and we still text, and we still visit, but it's just different now.
Yeah. That's one of the things that the mental health professionals do a good job of, is basically preparing you for,
yes,
okay, after the birth, there's going to be a shift in the attention given.
Right.
And you need to be ready for that, because it's just natural. I mean, a lot of the intended parents do try to stay in touch with their carrier, but tending to a newborn is a lot of work, and you're exhausted.
Yes.
You know?
And I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for any of your surrogacy situations, did you provide breast milk, or was that asked of you?
I did, actually, for all three. For the first one, I did about 6 or 8 weeks, just because we had to pump and ship, which was tough to ship, pack it all up and ship it to them, since they lived in Maryland. So we shipped it to them. And I think I did it for about 8 weeks. And then the second surrogacy, since they lived so close, they were able to come pick it up, which was much more convenient. So I did a little bit longer for them. I think we were about 4 months. I think they were about 4 months when I stopped. And then the last surrogacy, I actually, he was born in September, and I pumped through like March, but was able to get enough pumped and stored for them that he was able to make it through his first birthday. Wow. On stored breast milk. So
wow. So when you shipped, I take it has to be refrigerated, right?
Yes, we had to. That was the process, was getting it all packed up and in a cooler, and then we had to use dry ice, and then we put it in the cooler in a box and packed newspaper around those boxes. So it was a process to ship it to them, for sure.
That's really amazing that you were willing to do that for those families, and well, for the babies.
Yes.
Yeah, because they really got that benefit. So what has been the easiest thing for you about having been a 3-time surrogate?
I think just that I've had such wonderful relationships with them. It's been so nice to just keep in touch and to be able to go to the birthday parties, and the pregnancies themselves were pretty much easy too. So I just have been fortunate enough to have really great pregnancies and have wonderful families to carry for, and been very fortunate that they have stuck to their word and kept in touch with me, because I know I've read some things on Facebook too of families who say they're going to keep in touch, and then they don't end up keeping in touch for one reason or another. And so I'm just happy that it all has worked out the way that I had imagined that it would.
And well, that's an important part of the contract drafting too, is basically putting in there whether or not the intended parents are going to stay in touch. And it's pretty similar to adoption situations with birth mothers. Now, in your situation, you're not genetically related to that child, but you're still curious about how that child's doing. You brought that child into the world,
right? And
so you want to know that the child's doing well, that child that spent 10 months inside you yes. is flourishing.
Yes.
So getting pictures or updates, etc., getting a text just to know is really important. Thank you for joining us today, Brooke. We were talking about surrogacy. Brooke is a 3-time surrogate, and if you did not catch the whole show, it'll be on the Locke and Quinn Facebook page. And please join us next week when my associate Katie Dean will be talking about disability law. Thank you.